Good afternoon, good morning, good evening. I don't know where you all are. I am in New England where we got a lot of snow last night. So thank you for letting me be here because if I weren't here with you, I'd be outside shoveling right now. So that lets the rest of my family down there, lets them do all the shoveling while I'm here with you all. So thank you for letting me be here for our Tech Community Live AMA, Manage Apps Like a Pro with Microsoft Intune. I am here with three of my friends. Some of you have seen some of them before, and for some of them, they're brand new to these tech communities. So please be kind to them. I'm going to let them introduce themselves just the way I see them, clockwise, starting with Nicole, then David, and Iris. Nicole, tell us what you do, how long you've been doing it with Microsoft, and anything fun that you want to share before we get started.
Hi, I'm Nicole. I work on Windows apps right now, working on Win32 and EAM apps. I think, so I've been at Microsoft for 4 years, but working in the app space for around a year and a half. Something fun. It's not snowing here in Seattle, so that's great.
All right, thanks, Nicole. David.
Yeah, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Let's see, I've been at Microsoft for 25 years now. I've been doing various forms of work on deployment that whole time. You might have met and talked to me before around Windows updates in Intune. What I've been working on lately is moving over to the app space and helping out there with app inventory, which we announced at Ignite, and a few other app features, integrations with Explorer and a few other things that we're doing to try to help make app experience better and support the core work that Nicole's been driving around Windows apps experiences.
Thanks, David. And Iris, nice to see you as well.
Yeah, hi everyone. So nice to have all of you here joining the AMM session. I'm currently working on macOS devices, so it doesn't only include app. I'm also working on enrollment and also configuration related, and also have been working with Nicole and David on all of the cross-platform scenarios. So hopefully we can bring the valuable information to you today.
That's great. I think we're going to get some, since we have Nicole with EAM and Iris with Mac, I think we might get some cross-plat questions coming in, maybe even in that space. We do have a question already that's already come in. This is coming from Tech Community, and I get this from my customers as well, and I see it on some of the social platforms that I visit. We have Microsoft offers app deployment Intune through Winget, through Microsoft Store, through Enterprise App Management, the EAM catalog. There are so many different catalogs of apps, and many of them overlap with the same app in many of them. But Nicole, why would I use one store over another store, or one catalog over another catalog? Why use one over the other?
Yeah, that's a good question. So it's definitely everything works together, and you can deploy apps through all these different types of app types, and each of them has their own place, and you can use the three of them kind of side by side. So to start with EAM, it's our curated catalog of apps that we deploy through Intune. So definitely enterprise ready. You can use them. They're prepackaged Intune Win files, and we pre-populate a lot of the information to make it enterprise ready. Winget, more so admin configured and tested, and store apps are a lot of consumer focused, and your users can access all of the apps in the store. So just different app types for different use cases.
Thanks, I appreciate the answer. And I do see that a lot. When this is just a hint for some of the admins out there, sometimes when I go into the Microsoft Store to get an app, I don't actually see that app available in Intune, although it is available in the store. And so you might come up with that, and that's because there might be an age restriction on the app, or it might not be available in that language, or there's a few different reasons why. And then they go looking in Winget, and then finally they'll go looking in EAM. Again, it's really, some of it comes down to personal preference, and we recommend EAM as the catalog for your apps because we do make sure that they're packaged. We do test them, where Winget is kind of community curated. In the store is, they're done by the vendor. Our EAM catalog is definitely created by Microsoft and it's packaged. And again, it comes down to personal preference. Thanks for that answer, Nicole. We have a question that's more of a MAM question. That's app protection policies on Microsoft App Management. So I'm not sure we have the right folks here, but I might be able to take a shot at it. But this question is more on Intune MAM side. Will there ever be a day where we can have multiple work accounts on a BYOD device under MAM control? Is this being investigated and or worked on? And I'm not sure if anyone here can answer that, but I can. So I'm going to give my panel a chance first, and then I'll get into it. Iris, I see you smiling. Do you have a response to this one?
No, I think Joe, you can take it. Just give it a shot.
All right. So one of the things we are working on is a multiple account MAM. I forget what we actually call it, but it's multiple account MAM. And it's exactly what the question is asking. Will there ever be a time where we can have multiple accounts? And I want you to think about multiple accounts in healthcare. There might be a doctor that works for multiple hospital groups. So they have their Teams and their Outlook email configured for one of them, but then they can't configure it for the other one. And so I think that's the question that's being asked. Or if you're a consultant and you work for a consulting company, that you have email on your phone, but now you've placed at a project and that customer wants you to be able to get email on your phone as well. How does MAM work on both? And we are working on that for iOS and Android devices. Again, this is MAM, so it's iOS and Android. And we're working on that multi-account MAM. This is something that's not available today, and it won't be available for every single MAM app out there. Some of it will be reliant on the vendor who owns the ISV that owns the app to work that into their SDK, and some of it will be Microsoft, Teams, Outlook, first-party apps that we're working on. So a short answer is yes, it's being worked on. It should be available. This being a non-NDA, I'm going to say it should be available soonish, but it's something that we are absolutely working on. And those are some of the scenarios we're thinking about. If you have other scenarios that you're thinking about, please let us know that in the comments. Just follow up, reply to your question, and let us know in the comments about some of the other scenarios or some of the apps that you're thinking about. All right, we have another question about third-party apps, so let's see how this works out. What are some best practices in relation to authorizing a third-party application? The first thing, I might need more clarity on what authorizing means, but what are some best practices in relation to authorizing a third-party application? And I'm just going to let the panel shout out their answers there because I'm not sure who wants to grab that first.
I've got a few thoughts. Maybe I can roll some things, and then I'll bet Nicole and Iris will have some things to add on. There's a couple of thoughts that cross my mind. The first is do your research on that app. So I'm going to assume authorize means deploy it to my organization. And so that's what I'm kind of building on and starting with there. And so you'll want to do your research on the app, understand how well it deploys, what the experience of other admins have been. Web searches can do this. Copilots are great at asking this question. Then the next thing that I would do is do a deployment plan where you do some internal testing with a limited group of known customers, known end users that can provide feedback. Make sure it's working, make sure it's not interfering with other apps, get that testing going and maintain deployment rings, if you will, for the rest of the life cycle of that application. So when new versions come along, that you're deploying them in a controlled manner and you can get some validation that the new version is not introducing new issues before you roll it out more broadly. And related to that, the other thing that I would do is especially once you get it installed in your initial test ring, is I would start to look at the security vulnerabilities associated with that application. So if you're using Defender, for example, go to Defender or get your SOC to go take a look at that, find out what kind of CVEs are active today, how critical they are, what they impact, and think about the security implications of deploying that app more broadly. And look at the security history if you can as well to see if this is an app that traditionally has interesting issues or if they all stay kind of in the mild, not as scary zone. Those would be the three things that I'd start with.
I love those answers, but as soon as you said, there's one keyword that you said, I saw the phone lines ring up, as they say, and you said something about deployment rings. So now I have to expand on that a little bit because Nicole, and there are some things that you might not be able to talk about, but some of you out there know David as he was with the Windows update for business and deployment service. So deployment rings is very natural for him to talk about with Windows Update for Business. Not so natural with app deployment in Intune for deployment rings. Nicole, is there anything that you're allowed to talk about in that space just to shut down some of these lights that lit up on the phone lines?
Yeah, we've definitely heard a lot of feedback about deployments, especially testing rings and pilot groups being very difficult. We heard your feedback and we're working on it, trying to make the deployment process a little bit easier so that you can test through your pilot groups first and then slowly roll it out. So to make everything more secure, but happy to hear more feedback on it as we keep working on it.
Absolutely. Thanks so much. And for those of you that can see this screen right now, our best place to put that feedback is aka.ms/Intune feedback. And just probably you'll see that feedback on there. So just go ahead and give it a like to get basically your thumbs up on there. And if you don't happen to see it, go ahead and add that feedback. Again, that was aka.ms/Intune feedback. Any other best practices, maybe Iris, with some of the Mac OS apps that you see, third-party apps coming in? Do you have any best practices, or they pretty much mirror what David was talking about as well?
Yeah, appreciate it. And I think David brought up great points in terms of how you should kind of approach it by steps. Two other thoughts on top of that. First is, as Joey mentioned, on the app management for macOS devices. First of all, Apple has a whole documentation on how you should add signature to your apps. I think that's a great one for macOS users to start looking into when you're adding all of the third-party apps onto it. And on the other hand, macOS provides the PKG and DMG sidecar deployments that you can upload app locally and then deploy via Intune. Because at the end, you as a app and you are responsible for your company's security. So as David said, do some testing and use the Intune official channel for deployment. And on the other hand, we have the community groups. We have macOS LinkedIn groups. We also have a Slack channel for macOS admins. And I think Windows also has the MEN LinkedIn group channel. So utilize that and to see how other fellow admins have been applying deployments to the same app you're using, to take feedback from them. That will be helpful too.
That's great feedback. Great tips there, Iris. And one of those links that you were talking about is the Mac Admins group on LinkedIn. And that's aka.ms/Mac Admins, just like it sounds, MAC admins. So make sure you check that out. It's kind of community driven on LinkedIn, but our entire Apple developer and Intune, they all monitor that space as well. So aka.ms/Mac Admins to get some information there. All right, we have a question that came in from Christian on LinkedIn. First of all, hello, Christian. Thank you for joining us from Bavaria. What's the best practice for just app deployment in Intune? And I think we kind of talked about that. David gave some best practices about, when we're talking about authorizing third-party apps. But when we're just thinking about what's some best practices for app deployment in general? David, do you have anything else to add to what you've already talked about with authorizing? Any other best practices there?
Yeah, I'm sure there's a few good things, and Nicole can add some more there. One thing that comes to mind, I'll actually tell a little story. It goes back to my days when I was helping drive Visual Studio Setup, which is probably still one of the largest, if not the largest application on the planet. And I would have dev managers come to me and say, why are you making setup so difficult? And I would say, I'm not. You are, because you design features that require complicated installation steps. If you designed your feature so it was X-copyable, we would just X-copy the app and it would work a lot easier. And so that comes back to looking at the apps that you're choosing to deploy, and especially if you have line of business apps that you're developing in-house, letting your developers know that the architecture they choose and develop and design for that application can have dramatic impacts on the deployability and maintainability of that app. And the simpler it is to deploy, the simpler it is to, the simpler architecture you have, the more X-copyable it is, then the simpler it is to deploy and maintain even in an enterprise environment. So that would be one of the things that comes to mind that maybe is not most commonly thought about. But simplistic, the simpler the apps are to deploy, the better they are going to be to manage. And then when you have other deployment requirements, because some apps really legitimately have a need for more complicated steps, then we've got features that are supporting that, detection scripts and supersedence and dependencies and things like that that can help with that. And that might be some more that you could build on, Nicole.
Yeah, Nicole, I'd love to, you might want to talk about, explain a little bit about the scripting that we've just enabled in EAM and also in Win32 apps. And some of you may not realize we've enabled this in Win32 apps because it happened like on January 12th. So it happened before 2601 is actually released, but it's available today already. Nicole, why don't you talk a little bit about that scripting, the script installer?
Yeah, very excited to talk about it. And speaking of complicated deployments, David, definitely there's a time and place for it. And with complicated deployments and more customization, we enabled a feature called Script Installer, which basically lets you use a script instead of the command line prompts that we have today and are pre-populated in EAM to install your apps. So you have more control over just what happens before, during, and after an install. And we report basically what the script returns as success or failure. Kind of back on best practices or deployment best practices for apps, as well as like third-party authorization. Definitely one recommendation is to favor EAM apps. We do all of the curating and packaging for you, especially for third-party apps where we do the heavy lifting, so you have to worry less about it. But that being said, another best practice is definitely do the testing yourself, because we know that organizations have your own requirements for testing apps. So that's my best practices.
Iris, anything new from macOS you want to add as well?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of similar practices as Nicole and David mentioned on scripting. In macOS, think about apps in several categories. First is the first party apps, and then we support that without you uploading anything. It is embedded in the Intune and just one click away. And line of business is also the common one for a lot of you. And on top of that is the PKG and DMG that's deployed through Sideguard. And we also support pre-install and post-install scripts. That a lot of common use cases I see is, let's say you want to verify if the certificate has been there before deployed app. Pre-install script will help you to do that. And post-install script will also help you to verify several app status before completing the cycle. So all of these are great practices for those is uploaded from your local portal and deployed via Intune. And I will also share the link of a blog talking about how to use those two in the chat later.
Great, thanks, Iris. And it was such a good question, Christian. Thank you for asking it. We have a question from Adam on LinkedIn, and David, you and I were talking about that. And it seems like I keep coming to David first, but it's not on purpose. It's the way the questions are being asked. Adam from LinkedIn asks, can we have better reporting for apps when they fail rather than depending on scripting to create a log file and then dig for that file? Like, what's available today and where are we investing? It's one of the things you and I were talking about, David, is like, when it comes to reporting, what exactly is the problem that we're trying to solve for? And I think Adam lists a great one. Can we have better reporting for apps when they fail rather than depending on script to create that log file and then dig for it later? David, what are some of the
I really appreciate the question because it turns out reporting is going to be one of the next things that I'm going to be looking at. And so I'm trying to understand where the challenges and issues are today, because I know that we do a pretty good job of reporting, hey, this installed successfully, it failed. And what I'm getting from the question is what I anticipated the next layer of questions are. Reporting, you start off and the journey, and you want to, how many devices got the app? How many successfully did that? And then you start looking at, but wait, these ones didn't, why not? And that's where a lot of reporting falls short. And based off the question, I'm learning a little bit here. And there's one thing we can give, we give error codes about various install failures. But as the question points out, there's a number of details within the app installer itself that are present in the logs. And I think diving in, figuring out a way to be able to get a little deeper insight and make that available to you in the cloud as to why the device failed, why the app failed. So those can be grouped and remediated, and addressing the top issues quickly and easily makes an awful lot of sense, because that is the next step in the journey in trying to complete that deployment to a high success rate.
Great, thanks.
I wish I had more to say what we're doing right now, but
Big
understanding the problems
public
that-
event. We can't share everything that we're working on, but reporting is being worked on for sure. Again,
Yeah.
thank you. Thanks for that question as well. Go ahead, Iris.
Yeah, I can share one other thing from the Apple side. If you're an Apple user, you know DDM, and that is something we have been investing heavily on together with Apple on the collaboration. For example, DDM OS installation has already been shipped last year, and I hope that helps. The idea of DDM is really proactive reporting instead of have to follow the sync cycle every time. So let's say you make a script change on your app deployment, and then if the system identifies there's a change, then it will do the reporting for you. So that's the future on the Apple side, what we are seeing for reporting, just to add on top of that.
That's great. And just for clarity, DDM, Declarative Device Management. So I just wanted to unacronym that
you.
for people and for AI and whatnot. Great, thanks so much. We have a question from Tasty Pastry on Tech Community. And first, Tasty Pastry says, love these AMAs. I got to say, love some of the names of the people choose to use on Tech Community. Tasty Pastry does ask, what would be and I'm not sure if we're allowed to give certain names as an answer to the question, but what would be the easiest way to migrate existing applications from Config Manager to Intune? And I'm not sure, Nicole, can you talk to that? I know we're partnering with some of the third-party companies that specialize in that. Can you talk about some of that?
Yeah, I'm not sure about my partnering with third-party companies, but definitely migrating from Configuration Manager to Intune kind of takes a few steps, and co-management is definitely an option during the kind of time being. But maybe the best way to think about it is Intune is a new app delivery system instead of a direct migration from Configuration Manager. So I would say just kind of see what apps are available in Intune and package those, or deliver through both systems for the time being until you can migrate to Intune. I don't know if David has a better answer.
That's the tough part, right?
No,
is do I have to deploy them both? Do I have to repackage? We actually are partnering. Our marketing team announced this, I want to say in November or October timeframe. We're partnering with one company called RoboPack, and they specialize in migrating apps from, one of the things that they specialize in is migrating apps from Config Manager to Intune, so we are partnering with them. I don't know exactly what that partnership entails, but you can check that at RoboPack's website. It's, I don't know, RoboPack, RoboPack. Anyway, they are not Microsoft. They partner with us. They're one of our gold partners, I believe, and they can help with that process. But thanks for that answer, though, Nicole. And actually, Tasty Pastry also does. Are there any plans to have application groups in Config, like Config Manager has? So, Nicole, maybe you can talk a little bit. Are there any plans to have application groups in Intune? Not targeting deployment groups. I'm not sure what. To be honest, I'm not sure what Configuration Manager has in the application group.
I'm not sure, but definitely something we can look into and get back to you on. Got to look into what application groups Configuration Manager offers.
Sure. All right, Andrew in Tech Community is going to he's asking a question about connected cache. So I hope we can answer that. That's part of our delivery optimization process. So I'm trying to use Microsoft Connected Cache for Enterprise to expedite delivery of Intune Win32 apps, especially extremely large packages. It doesn't seem to be working for us at the moment. Is there anything more you're doing or could be doing to ensure that A, we can cache and encourage these things to cache locally, and B, we can monitor and troubleshoot it more easily? The monitoring for Microsoft Connected Cache seems to report very low figures for Intune. I'm not sure if anyone in this panel can really talk to Connected Cache delivery optimization. Iris, this is definitely a Windows thing. I don't think I'm going to have to exclude you from raising a hand here. But
Yeah,
Nicole,
out of the
David,
competition.
do you know of any work being done, or why Andrew's having this trouble with, like, especially with very large packages? Any work with the DO, the MCC team? With
Yeah,
Andy and his team?
we're definitely doing some work with MCC and DO right now. So I would be very curious to know more about what the issue is. It's a bit difficult to answer live here without seeing any of the logs or getting a little bit more information. But Andrew, I would love to connect with you a little bit offline to understand more of the issue, because we are doing work currently in that space.
And you can reach out to Nicole at, no, I'm just kidding. I'm not going to give you an email address. But she's on, Nicole is on Tech Community, so you can reach out through Tech Community. I do recommend opening a ticket, Andrew, just so we can start collecting those logs and start looking at why it's failing for certain apps and not for other apps. I'm sorry, David, I don't know if I cut you off if you're about to say anything.
No, unfortunately, while I'm aware of DO and MCC, I far from an expert on configuring and troubleshooting those systems.
All right, thanks. I'm going to go on to Freddie's question then. Nicole, this is directed directly to you. Freddie on LinkedIn is asking, is there any plan for the ability to auto-update apps with Enterprise App Management without the need to monitor for app updates and manually selecting to update it and manually going through that process? Any plans on doing an auto-update feature with EAM?
Yeah, I think updating is definitely one of the key things that we want to offer with EAM. So it's we've heard a lot of feedback, especially around auto updating and making it easier for all of you to keep apps more up to date. So it's something that we're hoping to work on and look out for it. Yeah.
Thanks. And as I've said a couple of times, this being a large public event, there are certain things that we can't share. So thank you, Freddie, for the question on auto updating. aka.ms/Intune feedback. Keep thumbs upping that feedback. That feedback is actually paid attention to by the product group. So it's very heavily requested on EAM apps, and it's something that we are investigating and hoping to release at some point, right? It's something that we want to do. We know you all need it, and we want to give that to you. Thanks, Nicole. We have another great name on Tech Community, That Guy Silva, or as we say here in Boston, That Guy Silva. On Tech Community, what are the best practices for deploying applications that install in the user profile rather than the C drive? And David, this goes back to something else that you and I were talking about also, maybe like reporting in inventory where the app actually did install to. But let's go to That Guy Silva's actual question. What are the best practices for deploying apps that install in the user profile rather than the C drive, especially including app control for business as the system you're using to prevent installation paths such as the user profile? So what are some best practices for deploying apps that do install in the user profile? Nicole?
Not sure if I have a lot of best practices for you there, but definitely App Control for Business is a great option to use there. I'm not sure if David or Iris has
Let me ask you this, Nicole. If I'm installing an application either to Win32 or it's from EAM, and I choose to install it in the system context versus the user context, would anything like that help in That Guy Silva's question? Like, choose if it's programmed to deploy in the user context and the user profile, if I choose the system context, do you think that might help? I suppose it would depend on the app, on the way the app is actually written.
Yeah. So I think that would impact installing user profile rather than the C drive, especially so system context will install for the device rather than for the user. That gives you a lot of control there. I'm not sure if that answers the question.
I hope so. David, I saw you nodding your head. And
I don't have much to add there. I do think going back to, how is the app designed? Each app is different, and some apps are just going to support user profile better than others. And so do your testing. Most apps are tested by default in system profile, and most of the testing of stuff that we do and features we build start with that. So you're going to find less friction with machine installed or system profile installed apps. But there are legitimate cases for installing per user and not making app available to all users on a multi-user system. So we do want to support that as well. And the app itself is a key place. Make sure that it supports it well. The rest of the part of the question, I'm sorry, I just don't have enough experience yet to help out with.
There was one thing that you and I were talking about, and you're working on app inventory, and one of the things that you were thinking about with app inventory, is it important for you to know where an app is installed, if it's installed right to the C drive, what's the location on the device where that app is actually installed? Is that important to note? And it seems that, at least for that guy Silver, again, that guy Silva, as we say, that would be important to know where it's installed. If I'm running a report on apps, it would be important to know where it's installed, so I know if it's installed to the C drive or to the user profile.
Yeah, and so that's one of the key additional data points that we're looking into with the new app inventory work I've been working on. The current app inventory is very basic, as anybody who's used it knows. We provide the name, publisher, and version, and that's about all that we supply. And furthermore, the current discovered apps has challenges in multi-user devices. And so we really only report on the currently logged in user. And when another user logs in, we can actually get confused and think that user installed apps have been removed and change the inventory until the first user comes back and logs back. It's that part of it's a mess. So we are actively working very hard to be able to do that correctly from the beginning with the new app inventory that we're building, and that we can show all the apps installed for all the users on the device. There may be a few corner case users that we don't pick up, but do that on each scan and keep them organized so that we can show you which user has that app installed and provide that information. And then along with that will be the install location. And so you'll have that whether it's a system installed or user installed, but you'll know where on the disk on that device per device that application is installed, which can be very useful for various troubleshooting steps. And we're going to provide some other fields that we think will be helpful with troubleshooting or management of the app. That's awesome. A couple of the benefits that I'll say we're looking to do. I think at this day and age, that's the right way to ship the feature. And so we're kind of fixing an old feature that has some gaps in it.
And Iris, is this an issue that you see with Mac OS as well, where it might install to the user that's logged in versus to the Mac OS? I bleed Windows blood, so there's certain things in Mac OS I just don't know. So I'm just curious, is that something that you see in Mac OS as well?
Yeah, not really, but it's for the reason that Mac or iOS just doesn't have C drive. So all of the apps just goes.
Well, I know it's not technically the C drive, but it's still on a device location as opposed to a user profile location.
Yeah, so it just goes directly to application folder, and all of the apps should be sitting there. So not too much of the path issue in Apple specifically.
All right, cool. We have a question from Jose about running multiple versions of the same Win32 app. So Nicole, what are some current, a lot of people looking for best practices. What are the current best practices for handling parallel versions of the same Win32 app in Intune, especially in scenarios where multiple versions can conflict with detection rules or supersedence during autopilot provisioning? We don't need to limit this to autopilot. So what is some of the best practices on handling the parallel versions of Win32 apps?
Yeah, I would say starting with autopilot provisioning, if you're using supersedence, I guess to start with supersedence, it's a great way to manage different versions of Win32 apps. And when you're targeting two apps to two apps to the same device, the same app to the device, use supersedence instead of targeting both versions. And especially with autopilot provisioning, supersedence is not enforced with autopilot. So if you're using autopilot with Win32 apps, just make sure to target the final version that you're hoping to enforce on the device.
Yeah, I'm thinking, what about those apps? And this is the way I read Jose's question. What about those apps that allow you to install version X and version X.2 on the same device at the same time? When I install X.2, it doesn't actually overwrite X, but I'm thinking, and I'm going to use a brand name because it's the one that's in the top of my head. If I have Camtasia 2019 and Camtasia 2021 both installed, Camtasia allows that, where most other apps would just simply install on top of it with the supersedence. What is in a scenario like that where I have to have two versions of the same app? Is there anything special I need to do in Intune to make sure there's no conflicts with detection rules or supersedence or even with autopilot? Or is this, just treated as two different applications?
I'm not sure. I think so for detection rules, I don't think they should conflict if the app allows it, but again, it's app per app, so would have a little more detail on that.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thanks.
it sounded like Jose's actually got some pretty good experience because the way the question was framed, and so is on the right track. You're going to need to do your research on the app, as Nicole said, and do some testing. Identify, look at the scripts for detection, and make sure that they're not generic, that they're version specific. Make sure the app is well designed for installing two versions side by side. And there are legitimate cases for doing that, but they are more complicated, and they're going to take a little extra effort to investigate the app, to understand how it works, and what then you need to do differently in order to have the right detection methods to be able to have them installed side by side. Otherwise, if you don't have to have multiple versions installed at the same time, where Nicole was going was, have your system set up so that you have the latest or the specific version that you want installed, and that older versions are managed appropriately with supersedence and uninstall scripts, so that as new versions are installed, that the older versions are cleanly removed. Sometimes you may need to do that proactively and not assume that the app can do an in-place upgrade.
Yep. Great. Thanks for that. Building on that answer. Iris, one thing that you had mentioned earlier was that Mac OS has like pre-install scripts and post-install scripts, and Windows doesn't have, and Win32 doesn't have pre-install and post-install. But Nicole, you were saying we did just enable Script Installer. And Cloud Inquirer on Tech Community is asking just to explain a little bit how you can deploy apps using that new PowerShell script feature. So what exactly does Script Installer do? How would I do that?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, the Script Installer feature is available for Win32 and EAM catalog apps. And where it exists is exactly where command line prompts are specified today. So when you're creating a Win32 or EAM app, there's now a drop-down option where you can select whether to use a command line prompt or to use a script. And essentially, if you select script, you can upload a PowerShell script in there, and your script will let you customize how the app is installed rather than just using the command line, and will return success or failure based on the return code of the script.
And I like, because it's a PowerShell script, you could do things like remove the icon from the desktop or add this product key, or as Iris was saying earlier, maybe you want to, before you even install the app, you want to make sure a certificate is already included on the device. And so these are some of the things we're thinking about with the PowerShell script feature. Cloud Inquirer, if you have some other scenarios you're asking about, or if there's things that you're wondering about, make sure you follow up in your comments so that we can answer more thoroughly for you. But really, I think the point is that instead of going into the Intune Admin Center, going to the scripts section on devices, you're actually going into apps, and you're still uploading this Win32 app into Intune. But instead of saying setup.exe, you're saying I want to use this script instead to do all that, the pre, the install, the post, everything else needs to be done. So we got a question from Mohammed on LinkedIn. What's the best way to update Win32 apps when an app version is packaged as Win32, but for install method, a PowerShell script has been used? So that's like to build on what Cloud Inquirer is asking. So we're going to use this script, but now how do I update that application? Do I have to update using a script as well? How for Mohammed on LinkedIn, what's the best way to update those apps that have been installed using a script?
I think that's a question for me.
I'm sorry, I'm actually looking at you, but you couldn't tell that. I was looking at you, yeah.
I sensed it. But Mohammed, like you said, the script is an install method. So how you can update apps, especially for Win32, is the same way using supersedence. And you can supersede it with a PowerShell script or with command line. It should work the same way. The script should just be an install method.
Great, thanks. We have a question about deploying Office apps. So this is open to everyone here. Question on Tech Community. We deploy Office apps via Intune, fully Intune environment. When I go to monitor discovered apps, so I'm going to go to you first, David. When I go to monitor discovered apps, there are many different, for example, Microsoft Outlook for Windows has 30 plus different version numbers. Currently deploying on current channel. Is there a way to bring them all to the latest version without having to manually select a specific version in a faster way? Let's first talk about when I monitor the discovered apps and I see 30 different versions of Outlook. Let's talk about that first. And then how can I get them all up to the latest version?
Yeah, this is a great scenario because it goes to the reality of managing devices, and that what we end up seeing is what we call internally sediment, if you will. Probably not the most publicly awesome term, but we talk about you go to deploy, and every deployment, especially the larger the organization you are, the harder it is to get to 100%. And so some are always left behind. And so just statistically, if you do that over several updates, you're going to end up with a kind of a long tail of not so updated devices. And I've spent some time looking at that in Windows updates, and the principles that we use there would apply to applications as well. And it goes to actually some of the troubleshooting questions that go earlier, and finding remediations for those things that seem to be the top issues. A lot of those are also app or device activity issues or connectivity issues. And so they may not be specifically related to the app configuration or deployment. So that would be a place to start. And typically trying to remove those and clean up those older versions is going to be a little bit of a project. Another area to start to look at is targeting. I have seen more than one case where a customer says, this is not updating. What's wrong with the system? And on deeper investigation, we find that, well, that device is just not targeted for the update. And so group management can be a little bit complicated. And so making sure that you have devices appropriately targeted to the latest version will go a long way there. I think those are just a couple of starting places for what is another potentially tricky or difficult scenario to troubleshoot on the air. But I do wonder if, Nicole, you have anything else to add to that scenario, or anything that I missed that's top of mind or low-hanging fruit.
No, I think you definitely covered it. You're the reporting expert.
I have a couple of things to add to that. I know I'm a host and I'm supposed to be adding, but I'm going to add, because on December 2nd last year, so at our last Tech Community Live, we hosted a session talking about AutoPatch and how AutoPatch also will update your Office apps. But if you're using Cloud Update for Office, we talked about using that as well. So Cloud Update for Office. So I'm not sure if the question itself is, when I deploy, I end up with 30 different versions of Outlook, or how do I keep the 30 different versions all at one version during the update cycle every single month? And I'm going to say AutoPatch can help with that. So it's not just deploying with Intune, but it's updating with AutoPatch, or using the cloud update service in Microsoft 365 apps. And again, we talked about that. I don't have a link to the, I'm sure our producers do. I don't have a link to that October 2nd Tech Community Live, but we did talk very specifically about keeping Office up to date and the best way to keep Office up to date, whether it's this version, using this solution or this solution. This solution, we did talk about that in an earlier Tech Community Live, so we'll get that link here as well soon, I hope. We have a question from Abhishek on Tech Community. Are we building anything like software metering? We get that software metering. How old is Intune? 12, 13 years? We've been getting software metering for questions for 13 years. Are we building anything like software metering? Usage reports are really important for licensed apps. Absolutely, Abhishek. If there's a custom solution, could you please tell us what it is? David, with your reporting work that you're about to start doing and some of the work that you are doing, are you doing anything with metering?
Yeah, and that's a great question because it is something that is in the area that I'm exploring and doing thinking about. The place that we would start is getting the right data. And we have to find the right data that is also going to be okay with privacy and your end users as well about how apps are being used on specific devices to be able to provide the basic information that might be used for licensing, metering, or other related scenarios. And that is usage data is something that I'm exploring, that I'm very interested in seeing if it's something that we can bring to Intune for those scenarios that you described, and there's a broad set. The next step, license metering, would be another step beyond that. And I don't have a lot more I can say about that. We need to get usage data correct. We need to get inventory correct before then. And we need to understand what XEs are associated with an application in order to be able to do usage data. And while that sounds like an easy problem, it actually on Windows is a very complicated problem. And we want to solve the XE problem as well because it solves other things other than usage. But we don't yet have all of that figured out. So it is something we're actively exploring for those kinds of scenarios.
And
so
I'm going to
steps along the way, maybe.
I'm going to go back to what we've been saying. Please add that feedback. Absolutely, software metering is on our Intune feedback page, aka.ms/Intune feedback. Just do a search for software metering. You're going to see a few of them. Just thumbs up, thumbs up, thumbs up, every one of them that you see. It helps us really with our prioritization on things, and it helped David really focus on what he needs to work on in the future. We have a Mac OS question for you, Iris. Yay, I'm so happy that we can ask this question. Iris, this question comes from Tech Community. We have Mac OS devices enrolled without user affinity. Is there a way to deploy apps as available in Company Portal rather than them being required? If not, is this in development? Loving the sessions. Some great questions and answers that have been really helpful. Thanks, folks. What about have devices enrolled without user affinity? Is there a way to deploy apps as available as opposed to required?
Yeah, I think there are two ways to achieve it. But in the meantime, I will also double check with my team and get back to you. So first way is just following the standard app deployment process. And there should be a toggle button, toggle between if you want to be required or available in the deployment process. That is one way. The other way is using the scripts to deploy app using the macOS script, and then adding an XML file to it to specify the parameter for it. Do you want it to be required available? So those are the two ways I have in mind, and I will also double check with my team if those are still in effect.
So on a macOS app, whether it's a PKG or DMG file, if I have the toggle for required or available, but if the device is enrolled without user affinity, that's still an option to do the available app?
Yeah, I think that's still an option.
Okay.
But yeah, I will double check for sure.
All right, great. I think we're out of questions, or we're out of time for questions. I do want to do some final thoughts. We had Ignite back in November. We've been working tirelessly on a lot of things since then. I'm going to do the final thoughts in the reverse order that we did the introduction. So I'm going to start with Iris, and then David, you're still second, and then Nicole. So Iris, any final thoughts on managing your Mac OS or iOS apps with Intune?
Yeah, so I think those are all great questions for today's session, first of all. And in my mind, I would just want to share our future. What we see is the app future is the more proactive reporting for all of our users for Apple devices. And on the other hand, find a cross-platform solution, as David mentioned before, that we are working closely on app inventory. So hopefully that is one way that we bring up a new solution for you to have access to more data. And last but not least, we will keep posting instructions on top of the documentation we have. So on the blog based wise, to give you more guidance on how to use all of the apps.
Great, thanks. I'm just going to give another plug to Mac Admins on LinkedIn, aka.ms/MacAdmins. And Iris is on there, and her whole team's on there all the time, aka.ms/MacAdmins. That's my final Mac OS thought. David, any final thoughts for our audience?
Yeah. I'm going to go back to one of the things Joe said is we love these because of the feedback that we get. We have so many ideas, either coming from you, the customers, or that we're thinking and imagining and talking about in the hallway of what we can do to make the system better. What can we do to make app management better? And we have no lack of ideas or areas to go and improve. So the real challenge is prioritizing those items and providing the highest value, as soon as possible. And so providing feedback, upvoting options like that really does help. The questions we get through here and through other channels are all highly valuable to us to help feed that into that prioritization process. And I hope that you're enjoying the journey with us of making app management better along the way as we tackle various avenues, various areas, and try to make the experience and the capabilities easier for you, more effective and more reliable, so that you look like the superstar in your organization. So thank you for being here and sharing with us today.
Thanks, David. Nicole, final thoughts.
Yeah, final thoughts, kind of just +1 to what Iris and David were saying. Definitely appreciate all of you for being here and sharing your feedback and asking questions. It helps us know what we have to improve, and it helps us decide kind of what's coming next and what's next to focus on. On the priority front, definitely keep giving your feedback through the feedback channels. It helps us decide what to prioritize next. And yeah, we're just going to continue making app management a better experience for you all, especially with, for me, packaging and updating apps, especially third-party apps through EAM. So yeah, I appreciate you all for being here.
Thanks so much. And for everyone that's here, our next AMA that's coming up is on Zero Trust. Very important in your organization. This Q&A in Under Tech Community will be open till Friday at noon Pacific time, I believe. So if you're watching this on demand, you can still ask your questions in the comments, and we will still go back and answer them all the way till noon Pacific time. That's U.S. Pacific time for all different Pacific around the world, but it's U.S. Pacific time. We'll have this open. Again, our next session is on Zero Trust, aka.ms/AMA/Intune Zero Trust. And we'll see you there. And then we have one session after that, which I'm also hosting. So I'll see you at our Copilot Agentic Agents session later on this afternoon. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.